I orphaned my husband and one of his brothers. A month ago my husband was in a motorcycle accident and was sent to the ER. He had road rash pretty much everywhere, but the only non-superficial injuries was his knee, with a soft disused deglovement, and his foot, which was mangled. They said he may need to get it amputated, but they wouldn't know until they did his first surgery. Our kid at the time was 6 weeks old, so I called my husband's mom and let her know what happened and told her I needed help since infants aren't allowed in the hospital and my husband needed someone to be there for him. I called my grandma too, who was more than willing to come. These are the only two people who don't have work, which is necessary since we live across the country from our family. His mom comes and drives out, which takes 2 days, and then never comes to see him. He had to go in for the amputation. They took the top half of his foot. He kept asking me where she was and when she was going to be there and see him, but she wasn't coming, claiming she needed to shower and help with our son, which my grandma was doing, and fully capable of handling herself. I told her when the surgery was and to come see him before it starts. The surgery got delayed 3 hours and she showed up 10 minutes after they took him back because her GPS was messed up and she couldn't figure out how to get to the hospital. It's 20 minutes from our house. So we got back to my house and wait for him to be out of surgery. I shower and eat and play with my son a little bit while she sits around complaining that our child is on the wrong formula because he has to have a soy allergy because she has it. He was on hypoallergenic formula that is considered safe for soy allergies, even though we knew he didn't have that from when I was breastfeeding him and he was fine. The doc calls and says my husband is out of surgery, so I leave to go see him and she said she'd meet me there. I get there and have to wait because he had to be resubdated. 2 hours I wait and she's still not there. I go to see him finally and she ends up coming less than an hour before visiting hours are over. She sees him for a bit and then leaves. I stayed the night. They only allow one person at a time to do so. I was in the hospital with him for 5 days at this point, so the next day I go home and ask her if she wants to stay the night with him and she says no. I told her that he needs her, and so she gets all pissy and gets ready to leave, saying she still hasn't even gotten the chance to shower. I told her he can wait 10 minutes for her to shower, but she refused and went in a huff. My husband told me the next day that once she got there all she did was complain that she's slave labor and that I'm mistreating our child. She stays to help us out after he's released from the hospital, which I was so thankful for. I thought we had moved past everything and was honestly just thankful for the extra hands. She was doing a couple things to our child we disagreed with, and when I told her she ignored me, so I had my husband talk to her, which seemed to solve the issue, and she was mad at him for a while. Sometimes when I wasn't home she would lay our kid in our bedroom while I was out and let him cry just out of reach from my husband, who couldn't even hold him. Just to punish my husband for telling her how we want to parent our kid. I know, because she bragged to me about it. She eventually got over it, or so I thought. My sil called and said the mill was drained and offered to come help us, which of course I agreed to. She came, and through her I found out when my husband and I were in the ed. She called her and said she was being treated like furniture and our son was struggling because he was on the wrong formula, so she really came to tell us we're hurting our kid, but instead found out he was perfectly healthy and happy. I wasn't going to say anything to keep as little drama possible, so I continued to tell her how much I appreciated her, as I had the entire time she was here, until she left. After she leaves, the next day I can't handle just ignoring what I heard, so I sent her a message letting her know that I knew what she said about us and that I felt hurt and betrayed. She couldn't tell me how she felt to my face. She scream texted at me about how unappreciative I am. And then texts my sil saying she's done with her and can't trust her when she was just venting. And then text my BIL, husband's brother, saying she's done with his wife and that he's an orphan now. She never sent anything to my husband, so we're just assuming he's an orphan now too, but who knows. My husband's life was changed forever and somehow she made it about her. Comment. It's all about me. I'm the furniture, the slave, I'm being used for child care. I'm being treated badly, and because I don't like how you're feeding your kid, he's being mistreated too because you're bad people, blah fsking blah. Your mill is awful. You and your poor husband are going through this shiz and she doesn't think of anyone but her. She'd have been well gone before she did. I'm sorry you had to put up with that during this traumatic time. I'm so sorry for how she treated both of you and at the lowest point of your husband's life. How any mother could talk and act that way doesn't compute in my head. I'm so sorry for everything you all are going through. Prayers to your family. She abused your baby because she's a fucking cunt who didn't get her way. She'd never fucking see us again. Be happy she took herself out. She abused your baby because she's a fucking cunt who didn't get her way. She'd never fucking see us again. Be happy she took herself out. Change. Seriously. You commented to someone else that she was verbally abusive to her own kids, and you got first-hand knowledge of how much she gave a DN about her son lying in the hospital. I don't get why people believe that a child needs a grandparent, especially an abusive one. The level of selfishness from your mill has me virtually speechless, especially on top of what you are both already going through. Perhaps the trash taking itself out is the best outcome from this awful experience. Wishing you both the absolute best through the healing. With this, you can start a preemptive paper trail by visiting your primary care doctor and ask, hey, my mill said Lo may have some allergy, how can we make sure if this is the case, or isn't? Because as far as we know Lo is healthy and doing fine. That way you are on record that you were concerned about a possible allergy, but also that you visited the doctor and that Lo was healthy and showed no sign of abuse or whatnot. This is so weird and sad to say, but based on your post, being orphaned by your mill seems better than having her pretending she cares about anyone but herself. I wouldn't be surprised if being orphaned stops when your mill needs something. I hope your husband is healing. Wow. Thank goodness Il thinks for herself and found everything good for herself. Also, for stepping in. That mill is straight up abusive to her child and grandchild at the same time. I personally think I'd throw some hate over that. Thank goodness she took herself out. Next story 2. My mill has given us tons of trouble over the years. A little background information: Mill has been an alcoholic and pill user since my hubby was a kid. In about 2020 she decided to stop drinking so that she could have a relationship with our kids, as we told her that we would not allow her around them drunk. My husband and I have 2 kids, and when we moved to be closer to family in 2021 we thought it would be a win-win to pay his mom to be our nanny. She has never been able to hold a job long, and we felt that this would help her out and that it would help us out because we wouldn't have to find a daycare/babysitter that we didn't know/trust. My daughter was 10 months and my son was 4 at the time I moved home with my kids, temporarily living at my mom's guest house. My husband couldn't move because of his job for another 6 months. At first, she was a great help. She bathed the kids, cooked dinners, and even stayed the night on days that it was bad weather so I wouldn't have to worry that I would lose my new job. I honestly thought she had turned over a new leaf. Early on she began buying groceries for my family, which I told her she didn't need to do, but she insisted, and my husband said to just let her if she really wanted to. So, I let it go. I realized a few weeks in that her and the kids were just sitting around watching TV all day, so I bought learning pads and asked her if she could use it with them and asked that she bring them on walks around the local duck pond to get them some exercise and fresh air. After I made this request, she had my Sil come weekly to go on walks with them. Then Phil started coming and bringing them out to lunch once or twice a week while I was at work. It was a bit of an overstep, but they were a huge help while I adjusted to my job and house hunted. So, I let it go. I closed on our new house after being home for 3 months. Unfortunately, we had bare minimum in household goods, so my mom purchased us a new TV, and all the kitchen basics and donated some furniture. I purchased some mattresses online so we could at least live decently until our packed furniture/household goods arrived once my husband moved home in a few months. My son told me that Mill wasn't letting him play for long outside because she didn't want him to get dirty, so I asked her to play outside with them more and said she wanted to start a garden, so I purchased everything we needed to make some raised beds and Phil put dirt in and we all started a garden in the backyard. During this time, my Sil and Phil were spending more and more time at my home while I was gone and started to stay into the evenings. She was still not using any of the learning items I bought and only bringing them out if she had help from Sil. The kids started to not want to go outside because they didn't want to get dirty because she was telling them not to get dirty so much. I was starting to feel like this was her home, not mine. She would complain about not having enough furniture, so I would buy cheap furniture off Amazon to last until we received our shipment. It was all overwhelming and very overbearing, but I felt confident that once hubby was home it would all calm down. That was until hubby moved home. As soon as hubby got home, she started complaining about things that I was doing that she didn't like. For instance, she made a scene about how she was in the broke house from buying us groceries, after I asked her not to. Then they would all make plans at our house, but not tell me about the plans. My mill made it a competition about who saw my kids more between the grandparents by constantly asking the kids when the last time they saw my parents was and asking me why my parents weren't attending get-togethers they weren't invited to. My hubby got a job in food service once he got home and had crazy hours and worked weekends but was off on days during the week. My Mill would come over on his days off and spend the whole day with him and the kids like they were a little family without me. They were all going and doing things with my kids and having firsts with my daughter that I wasn't able to have. He even spent Mother's Day evening with his mom. He worked during the day, and left me home with the kids. The job I had was terrible and very inflexible, so I was in office 8 to 5 mf, no exceptions. I managed to land a different job that allowed me to WFH 1 day a week and set my own hours, so I decided to use my one WFH day to spend with my hubby and kids on one of his days off during the week. It would also give his mom an extra day off every week, because she asked for a raise and we couldn't afford it. When I told my Mill this after work one day, she left in a hurry, then proceeded to call me and ask me what my problem was and that she knew I was trying to cut her out. I was hogging her son and that I had always hogged him and that she didn't know if she would be able to work for us much longer. After dealing with her and her constant pushing of boundaries and manipulations for 8 months, I went off. I told her she wants to spend too much time with my family. I essentially told her that she's not the wife, and that she was acting like she wanted to be with him all the time, as far as sleeping in our bed if she could. I called my hubby immediately after and he went over to her house, and they had it out as well. After that went down, his sister also told him off and stopped talking to him. This man cried real tears for probably the second time in his life and accused me of putting him in the middle of myself and his family. I called his mom and fell on the sword and apologized for the mean things that I said, and she said that she would consider my apology. I also called his sister and we spoke for hours, and I learned that she had been manipulating my Sil behind the scenes all this time, telling her that I was mean to her for all these months and taking advantage of her and trying to keep her from my husband. After this I had to beg my husband to allow someone else to watch our kids. He cried and begged me to let his mom keep watching them because no one would take better care of them. We interviewed several sitters and found one that was perfect and cost less than what we were paying his mom. We told her we would pay her out to the end of the month, but the kids would be starting at their new sitter the next month. We did our best to get our son excited to make new friends at his new babysitter's house, and he got to where he was very excited until he slept over at Mill's house and came home terrified about going to a new sitter. Apparently, she cried in front of him and told him no one can take care of him like grandma can, and made him feel like he was betraying her. About a month later his mom admitted herself to a psych ward for a week, and then a couple months after that she threatened to commit suicide for the 3rd time in 3 years and was driving around drunk. The police picked her up and booked her for a DUI. She didn't speak to anyone for about 2 months, which was very difficult to explain to our kids who had, up to that point, been seeing her several times a week even though she wasn't babysitting them anymore. It was at that point that my husband finally agreed with me after months of pleading with him that we needed boundaries. She still crosses them all the time, but it is a work in progress. There is much more that she did during that time that I didn't add because it would take hours to write it all down. My daughter is now 4 and my son is 7 and in 1st grade. Their new sitter had my son reading before he started kindergarten and my daughter is excelling.